name's Rachel. I am part of the Material Management Planning Committee for the Thumb region. So we're just gonna go through some information on kind of like what our committee is all about, what we've been working on, and how we're kind of working through this process with the state. But first, I was hoping that some other committee members who are here could introduce themselves. Yeah.
I'm Mike Miller. I'm from Tuscarora County, and I am the EPA, or the Designated Planning Agency for the whole region.
I'm Mike Davis, Santa County, composting facility there.
I'm Gary Howell. I'm a representative for Lapeer County. And more importantly, my alternate is right here, Brett Hagan. And Moses Sanzo also occasionally attends in our steads. We've had 3 people directly involved.
Because I haven't seen you yet. Okay. So this is here. We're all here. Good job. All right. So the Thumb Region Material Management Planning Committee. So you see the map, and so we're comprised of 4 different counties, which includes Huron, Lapeer, Sanilac, and Tuscola counties. So previously, you guys probably knew about the solid waste management plans. And so each county had its own separate plan, and that was the way that the law was written previously. So under the new material management planning process through the state, there's an opportunity for counties to work together, and that sort of makes it more like regional, so that they can share resources and also share like material management facilities. So that would be like recycling centers, landfills, and that sort of thing. So we'll just jump down really quick. There's incentives through the state for working with other counties. So that was one of the main reasons that we all got together and decided we should write our material management plan together. And you can see that each county individually gets $60,000 for the grant that's through the state to write the material management plan. But for doing a multi-county plan, the combined group gets $10,000 for every additional county. So we get $40,000 extra in grant funding because we have 4 counties working together. One thing to note is that these are reimbursement-based grants, so we have to spend the money before we can get the money back, and there's still some like kinks that are being worked out with the state, but everything has been approved up to now, and so we're kind of just like our budget that we've put together has been approved, and so we should be getting that money back from the state. There's additional grant funding available that's 50 cents per capita for each county, and that's up to 300,000. So then this additional money, it only covers the first 3 years of the planning process to kind of just like kickstart things. So I'll move back up. As far as the material management plans, so with the existing solid waste management plan, there was really a focus on landfill capacity, right? And like disposing of material is kind of the main way that we were going to deal with our waste. Well, so the state has kind of shifted towards a more sustainable approach. And the idea is to help regions and planning areas figure out what infrastructure they need to increase recycling rates and decrease the amount of material that's going to landfills, and bring back the personnel resources for the recycling side of things, whereas before we had a large focus on landfills, so kind of shifting the focus to help bring back some of that industry to Michigan. So those were the state's goals. I'm going to move forward. So the goals of our committee, we kind of broke it down into two main tracks of things we want to accomplish. The first being waste diversion, so decrease the amount of material that goes to a landfill, help educate our residents on how these materials actually move through our planning area, and being sent to landfills versus recycling, and then hopefully try and shift the focus and change how we think about the use and reuse of these materials, because we all know sometimes it's easy to just say I'm going to throw it away, but try and figure out how we can give our resources a second life, right? And that kind of leads us to increasing recycling. So we all know there's environmental benefits to recycling. There's also economic and social benefits. Something that our rep from Eagle, who kind of sits in on our MMPC meetings, he uses the term circular economy. You guys have probably heard that before. So helping local communities kind of kickstart the process to get them involved in the circular economy by liaisoning with the local units of government. So that's you guys. Thanks for being here. And kind of help figure out what exactly the residents, the service, making sure that they have the services that they want, and continuing on the public education side of things to kind of help people understand why recycling is important. And so this planning process is a 5-year period, but every 5 years our committee is going to have to go back through the plan, show that we are meeting the goals that we've set for ourselves, and then we can kind of adjust things every 5 years as we need to. So here are the goals for material management that are written directly into the law, the waste management law, part 115 we call it. So this is the language right out of the statute. Optimize recycling opportunities, including for electronics. And the state's overall recycling goal is 45% of municipal solid waste, or MSW. So that kind of means that this is, at least right now, is more focused on the residential and also a little bit on the commercial side. It doesn't include industrial waste right now. And then the interim step is by 2029 to achieve a 30% MSW recycling rate by encouraging and facilitating people to engage in source separation of material. And every time we recycle something or keep our yard waste out of our trash, that's source separation, right? So this is kind of where we're at right now. In 2024, the recycling rate across the state was 25%. And then we're trying to get to 30% in the next 5 years. And then at 2030 and beyond, the goal is to be at 45%, which also includes a 50% reduction in food waste or food loss. So a lot of times we think a lot about just conventional recyclables, right? Like paper, cardboard, plastic, that sort of thing. There's also a focus in our plan on organics as well. So that's your food waste and your yard waste. So that's kind of described in this slide. So we all know our yard waste is separate, right? Yard waste can't go to a landfill. That's been a rule for over 10 years now. So we do a fairly good job of diverting that material, and that counts towards our recycling rate. The thing we're going to focus on a lot with this plan is now trying to figure out how to track how much yard waste we're diverting. And then there's also, we're talking about food waste. At this stage in the game, probably the food waste is gonna look more like food recovery or food donation, right? So like trying to get more material, or like food that's not gone bad or like can be preserved, and sending it to a food bank, and being able to track that material would count towards our recycling rate. And then we also have the conventional recyclables that we all think of. Glass, metal, plastics, paper products, and then rubber and textiles would also count towards that. But those two materials are kind of hard to recycle, and those would be sort of more, that they would come later. So this is just giving you an idea of what actually is in the material that goes to the landfill. So this is a study that the state did back in 2022, but the assumptions should pretty much still hold for today. So you can see that paper, plastic, and food waste, these three right here, make up like almost 50% of our waste stream. And so paper and plastic are like kind of the first materials you go after, right? So we're good at recycling those. We have ways to do it. So we want to be able to increase the landfill diversion and recycling of those materials. And then the next ones we probably want to try and go after is food waste, and they have other organics here, but that's probably a second, like a later component. So, kind of the reason that I'm talking about organics so much is that that's something that like we're required to address in the plan. And so there's gonna kind of be a little bit more focus on that to start educating people, I guess. We kind of all know how recycling those conventional materials work a little bit. And the other thing is developing the necessary facilities to make that happen. So the necessary facilities, at least in this stage of the game, are kind of outlaid in what the state is calling the benchmark recycling standards. And let me jump down there because, sorry. Okay. I guess we'll go to this slide. So these are what the state's calling the benchmark recycling standards. So the first two standards, and you can see they have like the year that you're supposed to be accomplishing them by. Okay, so in 2026, it says 90% of single-family dwellings in urbanized areas will have access to curbside recycling. So the city of Lapeer is the only area inside of the urban boundary in your county, and they already have access to curbside recycling. That's an ordinance that the city passed. So that was good. We've already accomplished that, so that's awesome. The next standard is in 2028, 90% of single-family dwellings in areas with over 5,000 residents will have access to curbside recycling. So there's no other cities or villages in the county with more than 5,000 people than the city of Lapeer, so we're good there.
What about townships?
Townships are just cities, just the cities.
Yeah, so that's something that it's only for cities and villages with more than 5,000 residents. I do understand that you guys have townships with more. Yeah. And so that they're actually probably, and some of them do have curbside recycling, I think. And I know a couple of them have drop-offs, but they're only designated for those specific townships. So the main recycling standard that we're gonna be focusing on in our committee is by 2032, we're gonna have to have at least one drop-off location for every 10,000 residents that don't have access to curbside recycling. So the city of Lapeer has curbside recycling. And any other municipality that like contracts or is required by ordinance for their haulers to offer curbside recycling, the populations of those units of government are subtracted from the total, right? And then you take that number and divide by 10,000, and that's how many drop-off sites you need. So for Lapeer County, they're gonna need 4 drop-off sites. And the rule for a drop-off site to count is that it has to be open at least 24 hours per month, and it has to be able to be accessed by everyone in the county. So, like townships that have their own drop-off centers, that's wonderful. We want to be able to keep those open, and it's perfectly acceptable for them to continue doing that without, having to offer services to people outside their township. But we'll just have to add on to that, right? Like we'll have to have extra. That's not going to count towards our total. Does that make sense? Cool.
Yeah, 24 hours a month is not gonna satisfy residents because
Yeah.
they want to come on different days at different times, and we have previous plans in the county. And we traveled around and went to 4 different locations that, with a nighttime and a daytime and a weekend and whatever. So that's my concern is, that's 8 hours a week.
Yeah, it's not very much, and you're definitely right about that.
That's a
So
minimum though, isn't it?
that's the minimum. Yeah, we can have them open, but then the problem becomes like,
No, you have to manage them. or
yeah,
you get garbage.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's definitely something that as a committee, and we have like a lot of good experience because Mike runs the recycling center in Tuscola County, and another one of our committee members is the director of the recycling in Sanilac County, and they run a lot of drop-offs, and so they have the knowledge to help us figure out like kind of the best way to do this. And there might be it's gonna be a bit of a learning curve, I'm sure, in different areas in the planning region may need different things, so.
So you have to have at least 4 locations, have to be 4 locations.
Yeah.
Well, now that I understand Habitat for Humanity is collecting theirs and more, so it might be, we'll have to revisit that number. That number I put together a couple of years ago, so we'll have to revisit, but it's gonna be somewhere between 4 and 5 additional sites that will appear to meet the state standard.
It's a mobile or a actual building?
It can be a mobile, it can be anything, as long as it's open for the public to come and drop off their recyclables. And they all have to accept the same things. So it has to be a uniform standard of material that you're taking. It can be a trailer with somebody standing there, it could be a building, it could be, it doesn't even have to be manned, that's not required, obviously. We don't know what that's probably not that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it can be, like, there could be just an area of containers, or however you wanna do it. The state doesn't care how you do it, as long as you meet those standards.
So is there a standard of how far apart they have to be? So they have to be unique and individual, not just open to that many numbers of hours.
Well,
They have to be 4 differing locations. spelled out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're with the drop-off recycling, that was with Habitat, and we're in the process of finding a new location. Yet, the sustainability of, I think it depends, we want to talk about perhaps the drop-off locations, having more of them, not have a drop-off program that's staffed by volunteers and maybe a more sustainable program to have.
well, initially.
More drop-off locations versus depending on volunteer.
Right, when we initially started talking about this, we had discussions with Lapeer and Huron County, both would like Tuscola to help them run these drop-off sites.
now,
difference
so it's
here,
interesting,
too,
but,
yeah.
oh, good point, yes, of course,
Once
yeah.
you add.
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I forgot we don't draw a salary,
Salary.
forgot about that.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Cool. Okay, so let's zoom through the last bit of this, and then we can open it up for questions. So, why to plan? So there is there's an option, I guess, in the statute that says if you don't want to write your plan, then the state will write it for you. But we're pretty sure that that would be some sort of like set boilerplate. If the state writes your plan, everyone is gonna have to have curbside recycling. And so that's kind of the incentive for us, besides for the grant money, about why we should want to write our own plan, right? We know our planning area better than the state does. We want to be able to have input and control over the development of new material management facilities, and how we offer these services to our residents to make sure that they're happy, and we're meeting the state goals, right? And if you do not write your own MMP, then the eligibility for grant funding goes away as well. So, and you just want to, all in all, avoid implementing a plan that you didn't actually write, because if the state writes your plan, it's still on the county commissioners to implement the plan. So, with that in mind, that's kind of the main reason why we invited you guys here today, to help understand what you guys would like to see out of a plan, for at least like generally, right? I know we don't have all the answers tonight, but and then the other thing is that the plan will have to go out to all of the local units of government for approval before it goes to the state, right? And so we need at least, let me scroll to the side so I don't tell you the wrong number, at least 67% of municipalities that respond have to approve the plan. Otherwise it goes to Eagle and they write it anyways, even though we put in all the hard work. So with that in mind, we're here, and you guys have our contact information, and you can always reach out to us with questions, comments that might come up after the meeting tonight. And then, unfortunately, you aren't gonna see like a draft version of the plan, right? The plan that comes to you will be the one for approval, but there will be public hearings and a comment period. And that will probably be early next year, is kind of what our timeline shows. And so it's gonna be really helpful for you guys to look out for that public hearing and comment period, tell your residents about it, so that you can provide input on the plan to make sure that we're meeting what everyone wants, right?
You know, the public hearing is gonna be your only opportunity for it. You can come to any of the meetings that we have, they're open to the public, you get input. But what she's trying to say, what I'm trying to convey is, once we draft a plan, once the committee drafts a plan, and once they draft it, it goes out to a public hearing. It's a 60-day viewing time, and then a 30-day public hearing. During that time, public can make comments on that plan. That is also a time for the townships to make comments, because once it goes to the townships, they don't get a chance to make comment.
Or revisions.
Right,
So they haven't been involved in the process at this point at all.
well, that's why we're here tonight.
Yeah.
We're trying to keep.
But I guess my saying that is that in the county, you have to come up now with 5 locations if we subtract habitat. Then you wouldn't want to look for contiguous townships to bound together and then work on where they're sited.
Yes, but we're not to that point. So right now, all we need to determine is how many drop sites. Even if we determine that next year in 26, the drop sites don't have to be in place until 2032. So we have many years of getting the details in that would be up to the county commissioners, really, of Lapeer, and each county where they want their drop system. So
Mhm.
like the committee will just say, Tuscola, you're gonna need one, Santa Ana County doesn't need any, because they meet those standards. Huron needs one additional, but Lapeer may need 4, maybe 5. It'll be up to those commissioners, those counties to determine, hey, we want one here, we want one down in Elba, we want one over, whatever.
And the plan couldn't already, well, look at the plan about it.
Yeah, so what's gonna happen in the plan is basically there's gonna be a goal that's set that says, okay, we're gonna have 4 drop-offs. And then in the, between now and 2032 is when the committee is going to work with the county and with the townships and figure out how to make it a
Right,
reality.
but for example, I
Yeah.
think Dryden is still posting a drop off. So if they have a drop.
I don't think they are.
They
They
cancel
shut
it?
it down.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
we got a lot of it.
Oh, okay, so that's the thing. Okay, then it's gonna be, yeah. Cause you
Because
need,
of the
you need
same thing
something
that
like
you
the
talked
township hall, would- because if you need real estate, you don't have enough money in the plan for someone to use their land to do this. So you're gonna have to depend on something like a municipality,
That's existing.
location, existing,
Yeah.
right?
And that I could see being a tough sell because it can't only be open to their township. It has to be open to
But
everyone.
not necessarily, I think people run good with that.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to have a good parking lot. There's
Yeah.
some that have better than others, that have, we've done them recently. And it's not like, I guess if you did it only, 8 hours once a week, that would be strange. But they could be open more.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so you could have a drop-off in a parking lot of a municipality
Mhm.
that was open, and that would count, because they can come anytime the township hall's open, and therefore you cover that. And all we have to do then is get people to buddy together, and we can get our spot, but we need to use municipalities, because, yeah.
Yeah.
And, so they have to, they should be involved with the supervisors.
Well, the committee does have townships representative on the committee, which I believe is.
She's from Huron Lake.
is,
Yeah.
But yeah, again, once the only thing we're really gonna determine at this point is the number. But once we get to, once the plan is passed, if we need 4, then yeah, we would come to up here and say, we need 4, let's get with the townships and figure out where is the best place to put them. Do they have to be manned? Could we have one that's a 24-hour, somewhere that's in a well-lit location? There's a lot to decide, but right now, only thing we need to determine is what's the number.
And that's a minimum number.
It's a minimum.
Correct.
It's just a minimum. Yeah, I mean, if Lapeer wanted 20 drop stations, the state doesn't care, but you gotta have
You gotta have some.
whatever that number is, you have to have.
So it seems to me that the success of a comprehensive program like this is really gonna be dependent upon, not just figuring out where the sites are or how many we need or something like that, but then how do you actually operate these things to ensure that the waste or the recycling streams, for example, are as pure as possible? You know, that's been an issue in many municipalities where they have these drop-off sites and people
Well, it all
have
depends
stuff
on
in there.
single stream or multi-stream or how you do it.
Exactly.
Correct.
And multi-stream is less contaminated, but requires more equipment.
Exactly.
And it's harder to
It's
do.
gotta be
Yeah.
sent somewhere to go through.
And so you need that input of people who understand single stream versus multi-stream versus cleaning
Mhm.
versus, there's
And
a
then
lot
are
of
we- are-
nuances to that.
Yeah.
At the higher level, is the state going to open more MRFs then? If you're gonna do single stream, you need.
State is.
Mhm.
Right, so how are we
So-
gonna encourage MRFs to open to handle it, and to
That-
be convenient?
That's a very good question, and it's a question that we have asked Eagle and the state. And the response is that if we have the material, basically if you build it better.
Could someone explain multi-stream versus single stream?
Yeah, if the
Sure.
single stream, everybody throws it in a bin, it goes to a place where people stand and pick and sort.
Sort.
And then multi-stream means we tell you
Some of the single stream is also, it's not just human, they have mechanical, and
Yeah.
it's just
But
something.
it requires sort.
Yes.
Correct, yeah.
And so my question is, will the plan have, some sort of a component that, educational component or
Yes.
thing like that?
Mhm.
It's required that we have an educational component.
Yep.
You definitely need education.
Yeah, required or not, you would say,
Yeah.
yeah, it would make sense.
Well, some of us are uneducated.
2032.
Twenty thirty.
Seems like, you know, the higher government.
We're aging out, that's all we're
They're,
letting you know.
they're rated up.
These are volunteers.
Why don't they mandate that, you know, plastic which has a lower use in the recycling, we recycle it, but there's more that's being recycled than what they're actually being able to use. You know, they do it, federal government says by this time, you know, you'll have this miles per hour or 2 gallons per mile. All the manufacturers have to do this. You know, PFAS, the whole, issue there. Immediately, the fire departments have to get rid of their foam. Why is it a mandate that says by 2035, manufacturers of plastic now have to have like gasoline, now it's 10% ethanol. Now by 2035, you have to meet the standard where 90% of your plastic is biodegradable. As opposed to having all of these recycling centers and all these grants and all these different things for a product that we can, I'm one that pays for curbside recycling. What's the percentage of what I pay for every month ultimately gonna go in the landfill anyway? There's a use for metal, there's a use for glass. I've talked to all the recycling centers, we can't sell, we can't get rid of the amount of plastic that we.
Yeah. Tell your representative you are pro extended producer responsibility.
I do, and it falls on that. Now, the other
Yeah.
thing we talked about was the township, and you said the ordinance for, curbside recycling.
Mhm.
Gary, you know, Brad, county commissioners here, wouldn't it be, as opposed to trying to get, you know, 18 townships or whatever to all draft ordinances, publish them, enact them, wouldn't it be better to have a countywide ordinance that all trash haulers operating in Lapeer County are required to have curbside as opposed to doing a piecemeal?
But here's what I'm gonna say about the ordinance that's in here. It means that all haulers within the city of Lapeer must offer curbside.
Right.
That doesn't mean people have to sign up for it.
100%, I understand
Right.
that. It's-
So
so,
it's not encouraging,
like-
because people don't, and it does cost more to get that other truck through there, so they have to pay more to get it. And that,
I get it, I understand that concept.
Yeah.
You stick in
There's
Lapeer
access.
County, Rick Ryan, it's my understanding, is my hauler, offers
Yep,
it,
he's the
I
only
pay
one.
for it. Paul Ryan,
Does not.
Does not, and he's ours. We
And
got the right
so-
to do it.
So
But if they're
I will say this on
No,
that
that's the right
point.
thing to do, it's why Rick does it.
but the.
And that's
carbon
exactly
foot-
why Rick
but
does
the
it.
carbon footprint of it, you need to formulate that in.
True.
Well,
And
yeah, it's
then-
way more
It's
complex than
Right.
most people understand.
Yes.
Yeah, what I will say on that point is, I'm 99, I'm not part of the committee, I'm outside the
He's
committee.
an honorary.
I'm an honorary member, but.
he's the sender of emails.
The plan most likely will have that stipulation in there, that haulers coming into the planning area must offer recycling. Because I already know for a fact that if Eagle writes the plan, that will be in. So if we submit our plan without it, with it not being in there, I can almost guarantee you, Eagle will say, take it back, you gotta put that.
Go back to my question, as opposed to having 18 townships that have to draft an ordinance, to publish them, to go through that.
That's what I'm saying, the plan will have.
Wouldn't it be,
But if the plan has it, it's for.
So that would
it's
be a
for
county-
all
It
four
will be
counties.
for your town,
Yeah.
it will
It could
be
be for
every
all four
county.
counties. If
Yeah,
it's in
and
this
you
plan.
would need an ordinance, it would just be
Right.
It would just be-
the rule, yeah.
and just if anybody's interested in the whole thing, my wife was caught in a train. She said she hopes that nobody was hit
we should do.
Right, but we
Okay.
have to hold on to it until we get fired enough.
So
I gotta tell you,
Yeah,
that
and
Eagle,
that's why-
break and
but the
blows
other,
it everywhere.
the other part is Eagle has changed and now we have to pay for a permit to do recycling. And we have to report to them and we can't keep, apparently we're being accused of being profiteers if we try to contain ours till we have a full load, which then you're not, it's a better carbon footprint if you're shipping a full load, but they say that you're doing that in order to make more
Oh,
money.
did DART pay you for the certified?
No,
Oh,
that's what I'm
okay,
saying, it's,
okay.
but on every material.
Oh, I see.
So they are coming through and, you know, they,
Yeah.
you ship it or you have to get rid of it, so that's complicating the program, because if you want it to get recycled in a cost-effective way, Eagle's rules are squashing that
Okay.
for the small person. They have incentivized large corporations, and they are
It's
squashing
1
local
year
haulers.
holding time.
Right, 1 year holding,
Yeah.
And
squashes.
ours got picked up
squashes
once a
us.
month.
Right.
Gotcha.
So we didn't have to hold it, but too terribly long. But it does take a lot of space.
Right, but
It's
you
a
were making
storage
it for work,
space.
right, or something?
No, DART was picking it
Oh,
up.
you're
No, the
styrofoam.
styrofoam.
Yeah, DART was picking it up.
But yeah, there's
that-
been, but these
um,
recent changes with Eagle are not gonna help getting the program.
But so my question is I don't see it on the list unless it's listed under textiles. Is styrofoam a part of this as a goal?
It's not separate on the list. I'm definitely gonna keep that as a note. So what we've kind of been separating things into, we call them like first semester and second semester topics. That might be like a second semester thing, while we're still just like getting our feet wet in the
Yeah.
whole thing. But
As
yeah.
you're thinking about locations for drop-offs, if indeed that's, you know, the way this shakes out, you would almost have to keep styrofoam in mind in order to give yourself even an opportunity to say, yes, we want to do this, because there is no other place other than Mason.
Well, we
Because
take-
you
we take
need
it to
a
school.
facility. Oh, did you take it on to school? I
We-
didn't see
we
that on the
posted it.
website. Oh, I didn't see that on there. Oh, that's great, I'm glad you
Sound like
did.
County does it.
So soon.
Fabulous. So, but Lapeer County, we're it, and again, we're not now until we can, but you need, we were it, and so it's just something that we need to keep in mind
Mhm.
to make sure that the infrastructure is in place that allows you to store those big bags. DART comes, picks it up, it's free, and they take it and recycle it, and
And
reuse
you
it,
know,
repurpose it.
you'd have to think that through too also, in discussions with DART,
Yeah,
you know, if you increase the volume, are they still gonna be able to?
yeah, they still okay with picking it up and.
Oh, yeah, we've filled their truck before.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
First
great.
San Juan, they go sign, First San Juan fills it up and they can't get us, they'll still do it.
Oh, that's great.
The problem with DART is that right now they only have one driver.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they do.
So,
He's
Yeah.
a nice guy.
he is a
Yeah,
very
he's a
nice
good guy,
Yeah, he's a
but
very
he's
nice
it,
guy, but-
yeah.
but he's it, yeah, so.
But if you, that's the one where if you build it, there's styrofoam, it's unbelievable, there's a lot, And the farmers love us because we collect their cards. They get all of their cards from us, they get all of them in the area, incredible, they get them. But anyway, thank you for that, I didn't see it on there.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay, this was kind of the last thing, and we'll just zoom through this, but this was a study that the state did, the potential economic impact of recycling. So they basically took the characterization of solid waste that goes to a landfill and said, okay, here's what the value of the materials that we're throwing away are. And the idea behind that is that recyclables are worth money at the end of the day, and to try and keep that value in our local community, right? And make our program self-sustaining by being able to get the highest and best use and value out of these recyclables. So this was just kind of a breakdown, and you can see that plastic and paper and metal are kind of the three big players as far as like value. And keep in mind, this does not include material that was recycled. This is just the component of the landfill waste stream that these materials made up. And so this would be an annual estimated value of the materials that we threw away. So I mean, we're like over $250 million worth of plastic went to Michigan landfills in 2022.
So they're making the assumption though that all those millions of dollars could be sold somewhere to be reused.
Yep, yeah. And so definitely
And I
like,
could see the metal, the paper, the cardboard and stuff, but the plastic, that's a little bit harder to solve.
Yeah.
For me, it's way more problematic.
definitely. And so I'm not saying that like these numbers are,
That's okay.
yeah.
That's what it is.
But this is, yeah, so I guess kind of the overall idea is that there is money to be made, and, you know, we could send all of our recyclables out of the planning area, but kind of like what the committee sees as the best way to like make this a sustainable program is to try and keep the value here, so that the money and the jobs, can stay in the planning area.
So the educational component of the plan, as it stands right now, is it focused on just how to?
We haven't got that far yet.
Okay.
So we-
Okay, no, that's fine, no, that's fine.
That's- we
I
haven't
would,
got
I
the
would say,
educational part.
I would then, I guess, I don't know, recommend or suggest or whatever language. Perhaps a good component to add is not just here, how to handle all this recycling that you have, that is critical, but get ahead of it right out of the gate and introduce the 5 Rs, where you just refuse it to begin with. Just don't take the plastics to begin with. And teach people, refuse the straw, refuse the container, refuse the bag at the, try to minimize how many packages you get that have styrofoam. Just refuse it. Reduce all of it, if at all possible. That's the second R. And these are in order. Refuse, then reduce, then reuse it, if you can. Repurpose it. And then the very last thing you do, if you can't do any of those other things, is recycle. And then so your volume is down. And it's sort of like teaching even the little kids, like, just do this and you won't have as many recyclables, and then you don't need as many of these other things. So anyway, that's maybe an educational piece there.
Sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, that's the end of my slides, so I'm gonna quit talking and open it up to you guys.
I have a question. How does it work with Tuscola, who has all the recycling paid or helped by taxes? Of course, Pier does not. So how is it fair to you guys in Tuscola? What's gonna happen with your millage that everybody pays every year on their taxes? I'm glad you're helping us out.
I get, oh, you mean like for coming here to do it?
Cause you're not gonna limit your building, and then, or is that gonna fund what
That's
you
gonna
already
count as one of
have?
our locations.
You're talking about us, Tuscola, coming to do job sites in
No,
other counties?
like in Sand Lake, you're saying they have dispersed their program, so they have enough sites that meet the
Yeah.
requirement. You have the building that's on 24,
Yeah.
and you're one location, so you're gonna need to open up a
I
location.
need one more location, but see, we already do,
So you only need 2?
yes.
Population.
We don't have
But
to-
doesn't Sand Lake County also have it on they have a millage for recycling?
Yeah, they got, but they have 7 drop-off sites right now.
No, I'm just amazed that.
No.
I'm just amazed, I don't wanna pay, but I'm just amazed that.
Why not?
Sand Lake and Tuscola would wanna team with or partner with Lapeer, who's not paying, and Huron probably is not paying. I don't know, it
Well,
just seems
so
a
like,
little.
well, Pierre's not doing anything, like, so we're not townships, we just need to add a couple of hours. So that'll be a labor cost to us that we'll have to pay, which we can absorb that. Now, Lapeer has really nothing, not like a facility, not like a MERC or anything. I mean, you're there, you would count as a drop site. So, now, if Tuscola comes into Lapeer, because we're village funded, we can't use village funds to do that. So, there's been very preliminary discussion, like how would we fund it? So Lapeer gets grant money, Huron County gets grant money. Can Lapeer, can we do this for Lapeer without going over what they're gonna get through the grant? Same with you.
Right, because a lot of people, their argument with how we do it is because it has to be by fee, because it's not a village-based thing, it doesn't have funding.
Right.
So, and trucking is expensive, vehicles are expensive, all the parts of it, require that. And that's always an argument, and people don't like it, and I say, well, they pay for it in taxes, they don't just pay for it out of their pocket. And so the sad thing is that in Lapeer, the people who care the most are paying the most, because they're showing up, doing the right thing, and paying for it. And that's the tough part. I mean, other countries penalize people if they get caught not recycling, so you pay fines.
Well,
So
I think at
it's
some
paid for
point
something.
we'll probably, because this is my thought, is like, this is the foot in the door of this. Hey, just do this minimal thing. And then we're gonna review it again in 5 years. I think every 5 years, they might up the ante. I will be surprised if they don't. I'll be surprised if we don't come today where they have what they call lid lifters going through people's garbage, recycling them, giving out, they call them food statements. I think we'll get to that point at some point. But until then, right now, we just have to do it.
Which is certain urban areas in America that does.
They already have, yeah.
You know, right now, what they're coming, granted, it's fairly minimal, but just know, we have 5 townships that do pay for the residents to bring their recycling to us.
I
They
understand,
pay
they
it.
used to all pay us.
It's
So-
just
so
small.
we
Oh,
had-
is that right?
Yes, we had
Yeah,
consultation.
But it's a small,
We
it's
did.
a small amount.
Right,
yeah.
and it was a small amount, it was 32 cents per person, covered the
Oh,
whole year.
it's $4 per car.
Right, no, but I mean, we.
But they're willing to pay for that.
Right, but when we ran out of tipping fees from the previous landfill, that's when we set it up with all the townships. And then some of the townships thought they could make all the money themselves, and it lasted 4 months, and then it went out of it. So-
And then there was nothing.
Right, because they blew up what was working
Yeah.
and decided,
Interesting.
and it didn't work.
And then a group of volunteers in 2012. And then that's how they had it.
Right, but I mean, there's a history.
Yeah,
He's
for
been
sure.
involved since 1990 in the town. So they're.
And I guess I will say that like one of the goals of like our public education program will probably be to get the information into people's hands and like so that people are demanding the service, right? They're not just willing to pay for it, they're upset that they don't have the service. Ideally, that's where it would be one day.
So just remember that your county is your county. There'll be the overarching plan, but anything that happens in this county will have to go through the commissioners. So like the drop sites or how they wanna do their drop sites, they may say, thanks Tuscola, but we're gonna handle our own through Howard. We haven't reached that point. So don't think of like this committee is going to tell you what you have to do. The committee is working with the people, as they have representatives on the committee, to say, okay, this is the basic goal, this is the basic plan, now Lapeer can take that and say, okay, we need so many drop sites, they figure that out. The committee won't have anything to do with that. We will definitely.
We can provide technical assistance
Yeah,
and
we'll
input,
definitely
but
help,
yeah.
but
Mm.
as far as locations or how they may wanna charge or however, if they're gonna pay you to do it or Joe Blow down the street or. Well, it doesn't have to be 2032, it can start whenever, but.
To Gary, and you guys
That's what it has
have
to be.
started those conversations?
Yeah. Let me make a couple comments about the beer, because Mike's exactly right. We're
Say that
talking
again.
about a long, not this Mike, he's very seldom right.
Oh.
Anyway, we're at the beginning of this process. It is gonna be, as Mike Miller explained, we're formed this four-county operation, frankly, to maximize funding available for recycling efforts, and frankly, to take advantage of Tuscola and Sand Lake's experience in running these things. Now, I can tell you, political reality is, we're not gonna pass a millage in the near future in Lapeer County. We couldn't even pass a millage for roads, and we got the worst roads in Southern Michigan. So, you gotta have a pragmatic approach to this thing. We wanna make progress. Fortunately, with this legislation that got passed, we've got a funding stream now for multiple years. So we can get the planning started, we could actually do some work on the drop-off sites, things like that. There's been a number of comments made that are very relevant, like, we're not gonna buy real estate, sure. We've gotta have a practical approach to this, where we can find sites, whether we're able to work with existing facilities, private enterprise that can help us meet the goal, whether we gotta use some sites on county-owned property, or township-owned property. We're all at the beginning of the process. We're very interested in making that progress, but a lot of the questions we're talking about, we cannot answer tonight. If we can get, as our chair has pointed out, we get from here to a finalized plan for the four-county region, then we can proceed to develop sub-plans for each county. And ours will look different, you know. We don't have the millage that Tuscola does. But we've got a lot of interested people, we've got some private entrepreneurs that are making a real contribution. We can put together a plan over time. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's really the framework we're operating in. We're open to anybody that's got a good suggestion as to what we can do to enhance recycling in Lapeer County. And you're not gonna see the government step in and tell you, you have to do certain things. That's not gonna fly. It's gonna have to be the educational process, the ground up, the citizens that want to recycle in order to help the environment and to be good citizens. Anyway, if that helps a little bit as to our perspective, ultimately, whatever we do will be going to your county board of commissioners and going from there. Any questions about Lapeer in particular? Good, I'm glad Mike answered that.
I do have one, Gary.
Yeah.
Thanks for that info. One of the things that I've always been curious about is how do we know what the people of the county want from the recycling program without some sort of a process to garner that information, gather that information?
They want it free.
Public input.
They want it convenient.
Well, maybe.
They don't wanna sort, they wanna just show up and just.
No, but they, these are the things, I hear it all the time, they want it free and they want it convenient. And that's why I'm concerned about this 8 hours a week, that's not gonna meet the convenience.
And just to answer that real quick, the committee did send, early on, did send out a survey to every township in the planning area. I think there was over 125 things that mailed out, but unfortunately, we only got 30, 40 maybe.
Not
I don't think it was 40.
even 30.
We got very low response back.
Just to the townships, not
Yeah.
the residents?
No.
No, not the residents, to the townships.
But it's a real challenge to get that feedback.
Well, tell me about it.
Yeah.
Folks are home watching television or going to the football game and not necessarily thinking about recycling. Short of a vote, which you can't really do unless you have a millage proposal, you're going to be looking at either public hearings or questionnaires that can be sent out. There is a way to do it through tax bills depending on the local units of government if they want to cooperate on that. But I can tell you, having been through a number of efforts for different purposes over the years, getting a response rate is really tough. You send out 100, you get 2 back. It's just human nature.
And those response rates, particularly on paper forms, have just been going down for the past 20 years, and they're terrible.
I think it's gonna come down to more, all of us collectively having a sense of public policy, what they are interested in supporting. Rachel and Mike and everybody else have done a superb job. This is not easy stuff. It doesn't just jump off the page at you, how we get, particularly for Lapeer County, where we have, as a government, essentially zero experience. It's been done through cooperative efforts, a little bit of private enterprise, and very little else.
Cool. So just remember to come to the public hearing and review the draft plan when it comes to you.
And
Give us your
everybody's
feedback.
welcome to come to the actual committee meetings on the third Wednesday of the month at 10:30 in the morning at the Tuscola County Fair. You can reach out to anybody knows this, wherever, I'll get you that information. I do send out the agenda to all the townships before every meeting. Yeah, third Wednesday of the month.
And, did you say something?
The people still being taken care of.
It's, the address is 171 Market Station.
Definitely. Okay, well, that's kind of all we had. I really appreciate you guys coming out, and yeah, if you ever need anything or have questions, or just wanna talk about how recycling or anything is going, reach out.
Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate it.
All right.
The train thing turned